Cool. Okay, let's start. So hello everyone, thank you for joining and welcome to Delicious Journeys webinar. We're joined obviously by Nathalie today from Sutralis. Nathalie will be taking us through the French retail market, providing us with some key information covering the structure of the industry, distribution, French consumer insights and advice on exporting to France. So please just drop any questions in the chat bar and Nathalie can answer at the end. So now I'm going to pass over to Nathalie. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for the introduction. So thanks, everyone, and welcome. Let me share now with you the presentation. Here we are. I hope it's all okay. It's all on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. 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 So let's start. Before we really get into the deep water, as I would say, I just want to remind you of a few facts and figures about the French market. So obviously France is one of the biggest market in Europe. We have 67+ million inhabitants and the big majority of it are urban. So 81% are urban population. Why it's important? It's because it will affect obviously the way we eat and the way we consume. So I will explain that a little bit later in the presentation. We spend almost £400 a month for food, so 385 to be really precise, which represent more than 13% of our total household expenditure. And it's still more than the average EU, because in EU, food represents just above 12% of all the expenditure. So which means food remain quite an important part of our budget. But more importantly, for a potential exporter to France, we still import 20% of our food product and the big majority, 75% from the EU. So which means there is definitely opportunities for potential overseas exporters. I want also to give you a quick overview of the main consumption trends here in France. I guess we have noticed the new change and this new trend all across Europe, of course. But in France, health and well-being market is definitely key. 69% of the French population is really concerned of the impact of their diet on their health. So they really are looking for more natural products and healthier products. And the big majority of French people, 84%, are really keen to choose a product with more natural ingredients. So this fact means that we have seen the rise of very dynamic markets, like free from, for example, like less low calorie, less low sugar, less low fat, excuse me. We have also the snacking, which is growing in France because we have a more and more on-the-go life. But snacking, we're really keen on snacking, but we don't want to compromise on taste and on natural ingredients. So healthy snacking is getting stronger and stronger here in France. And you have also the vegan/flexitarian market, which are doing extremely well in France. Just maybe a point, just to remind you, the vegan market or the vegan population, it's still quite small. It's still quite a niche market in France because it represents, I would say, only 4% of the population, vegetarian and vegan. But the key for any producers who have a plant-based product, the key target are really the flexitarian. Flexitarian represents 35% of the population here in France. So they are really your audience you will need to reach if you have a plant-based product, because obviously they want to reduce their animal protein intake and they are definitely looking for new, innovative and healthier plant-based products. I finish with the organic segment because the organic segment is definitely the strongest here in France. It represents 12 billion of euros last year, so that's definitely huge. Germany and France are the leader in Europe for organic products. And once again, a proof that the market is really growing. When we talk to buyers, when we talk to category manager, and when we present a product, one of the first questions are you organic? So that's definitely a point. And for the consumer, it's kind of a promise that the product will be healthy. So it's just to give you a quick overview of the main consumption trends here in France. Let's carry on now with the buying trends, which have, I would say, got stronger with the COVID and with the crisis. So as you can see, 43% of French people consider the crisis as a turning point in the way they consume, in the way they will buy food. And we have 4 main pillars which define the way French consumers want to eat and want to consume. So the first one is traceability. We really are looking at the label. We really are looking at the origin of the product and how the product has been processed. Just for you to remind, maybe we've been through a lot of food scandals in France, was maybe 6-7 years ago now. And we want to be sure that that we can guarantee the origin of the product. So that's very strong here in France. The second point, or the second pillar, is sustainability. Obviously, we are more and more aware about all the environment issues. We are more and more aware about the animal welfare. So at equal price, or we are even totally happy to spend a little bit more if the product is fair trade, if the product really respects the environment and respect the animal welfare. So that's something which is also really key here in France. The third one is proximity. So when I say proximity, and especially with the COVID, obviously it's been the geographic proximity. So we French people leave behind the big hypermarkets to prefer the smaller shop, the convenience shops, and to have some kind of relationship with the shop owners. And for overseas potential, for potential overseas exporters, when we say proximity, it's also it's getting more and more important to tell about your story as a producer, to explain how you have set up the company, why you have set up the company, what are your values as a human being. That's really, really important. So I think the consumer wants not only a product, not only a taste, but he wants to buy a story behind. Excuse me. And the fourth one is digitalization. So obviously more and more with the COVID, the drive and e-commerce is definitely a key in the way we buy food, and more we do our shopping online. Excuse me. In addition of all that, the information is really key for French consumers. So we have in France the NutriScore. It's kind of a ranking between A to E, and you can find this logo on a lot of products at the moment in France, on the packaging, I mean. And the ranking gives you the nutritional quality of your product. So you can really see if a product is good for you or not so good for you. So AB is good. And of course, DE is not so good. Let's carry on now with the subject of our webinar. It was just a quick introduction. So now I just want to give you an overview of the main retailers here in France. So you can see that we have three main retailers. So it's Leclerc, Carrefour, and Intermarché. And between the three, they share half of the market share for France. But which is really important to understand when you want to target the French market is really the structure and the profile of the different retailers. So you have two main structures. We have what we call the integrated retailers, and on the other part, you have the independent retailers. So for the integrated, you have the big name like Carrefour, Casino, Auchan, Deleuze, Lidl, and Aldi, and I'm sure you know at least a few of them. And for the independent, you have Leclerc, Système U, and Intermarché. So I'm going to give you an overview of the structure in more detail in the next slide. But what I want to explain here on this slide is what kind of profile and what kind of client you can expect from this retailers. So Carrefour, Casino are really interesting when you're just starting as a new entrant on the French market, because they are really, really keen on innovation. So if you have a new product, something a little bit different, go to see them first. They may be quite receptive to your product. Please note that Casino is a group. So between the group, you have Casino, of course, but you have also Franprix and Monoprix. And Franprix and Monoprix are the more urban supermarket, I would say, the more premium, so a little bit like Waitrose or Market Spencer in the UK. And once again, sometimes or most of the time, it's really good to start with these two retailers when you have a new product, because obviously they're going to be in urban area, they're going to touch wealthier clients, so that could be quite interesting to test your product first. You have then Auchan and Deleuze. So Auchan and Deleuze are more what we call followers. So most of the time they quite like to see what's going on with Carrefour and with Casino, and then they will be listing your product. But it happens that Auchan can also be quite keen to list some product, but you have to be really, really innovative, or I would say price-wise, you have to be quite competitive. And of course, like in the UK, you have Lidl and Aldi, and as you know, they are all discounters. If you look at the independent, Leclerc are really, really price-driven. So that's something you need to take into account. Système U and Intermarché are more keen to work with local and French producers, I would say. I don't mean it's impossible to list an overseas product, not at all, because we managed to do it in the past, but they will prefer the French producers. Excuse me. With this slide here, I want to give you a more detailed overview of the way you need to approach the integrated retailers and the independent retailers. So integrated retailers, it's quite straightforward. You talk to one category manager, you talk to one buyer after having talked to the category managers. So you have one point of contact, and the main office is in Paris. So when you go to have your meeting, you go to Paris, you go to the headquarters. And as I explained, you're going to meet the category manager or chef de produit for private label to talk about your product, to talk about the marketing, how your product can help the category. So that's the very first meeting you're going to have. Once the category manager is quite happy with your product or quite keen to start a second round of negotiation, you're going to talk with the buyer, and with the buyer mainly you're going to talk about your commercial offer, and you're going to talk about the pricing. Then the two go together, they confirm the listing, sometime not, depending on your pricing, of course. And once the listing is confirmed, obviously you have to deal also with the logistic team of Carrefour or Casino, for example. I would say it's quite straightforward because you have one point of contact, and if you have the chance to be listed, you will see at some point your product in the majority of the shops in France. So I'm not saying that straight from the beginning you're going to be in all Carrefour or in all Casino. It's not what I mean, but step by step you will gain in visibility and in number of stores with this group of retailers. If we take the independent, it's slightly more challenging, I would say, because of course you have one national center. For Leclerc, it's based in Paris, and for most of them, it's based in Paris. They're going to talk about the national strategy, but they're going to deal with the big brands. So just to name a few, Coca-Cola, Danone, etc. As a new brand, a smaller brand, you will first need to see the regional centers. So I explained, Leclerc is actually a cooperative, and they have 16 different purchasing centers in France. So if you want to start something with Leclerc, you will need to prove that your product is viable within the regional center, and then you will go back to see the national purchasing center. So, which means that if you want to target regional center, you will need to talk to 16 category manager, to 16 buyers. If you want to cover France, of course, the whole territory. You will have to deliver 16 warehouse. So it's something you need to be really sure. It's something you need to be sure to do. And it's something you need to be sure about the budget, because obviously logistics is going to be a cost. Regarding time, it's going to be a cost. And you will need to have a sales force on the ground to push your product. And why you will need that? It's because the store manager actually are owners of their store at Leclerc. So even if you are listed at a regional center level, it doesn't mean that the store manager will have your product on the shelf. So you need to have your team, you need to have a sales force to push your product, I would say, on a daily, on a weekly basis to the store manager and convince him or her to have your product on the shelf. So it's totally feasible. We have clients who work with 4, 5, 6 regional centers at Leclerc, but it's something you really need to take into consideration if you want to target these people. Just to give you an overview maybe of the positioning of our different retailers here in France. So as I was explaining before, you have retailers which are quite premium or really urban, really into innovation. So you can see for Carrefour, Franprix, Monoprix, Casino, then a little bit less Système U, and as I explained, Système U is more keen to work with French producers. And then on the other side, you have the retailer which are more followers, as we can say, or very price driven. So like Leclerc, or of course the discounter Lidl and Aldi. It's quite interesting also to look at the different format of a supermarket and hypermarket here in France, and especially in the current context with the COVID. So as you can see on the graph, hypermarket are still a big part of our stores here in France, but the convenience stores and the supermarkets are really growing, and even more as you can see on the graph with the COVID. So as I explained just before, the French consumer is really keen to leave a little bit behind the big hypermarket and go to smaller formats like convenience stores and supermarket. And especially with the COVID, when you were not allowed to travel too far, you really want to pick your food in the shops just next to your flat or your apartment or your house. So you can definitely see a good increase for the convenience store and supermarket, so about 10% for last year. Hypermarket are still progressing, are still developing, but at a slower pace. So only 5% in comparison with supermarket and convenience stores. Click and collect. Yes, click and collect is definitely the big success, if I might say so, of the crisis. More and more people, as I said, didn't want to travel to do their shopping, didn't want to go out. And they really, for the first time, actually, they really experienced the click and collect facility, so what we call Drive here in France. And you can see that the growth is absolutely impressive. We gain almost 50%, so 48.8 to be really precise. So in 2020 versus 2019. Leclerc, we were talking about Leclerc just before. So Leclerc is definitely the leader with the click and collect, and which is really interesting for this way, for this new way of doing shopping, is that French people who have tried the click and collect for the first time during the crisis are really, really keen to carry on. So definitely we see an impressive increase for this way of shopping. I will go quickly on the hard discounter because it's interesting to know that they're still growing, plus 12% in 2020 versus 2019. But more importantly, I would say, before a few years ago, the discounters in France were not really attractive. When we entered the supermarket, it was not really sexy. Obviously, it was price driven only. But Lidl at the moment is, first of all, the leader, if we take the discounter in France. But not only the leader, but they're really trying to change their profile. So you have a lot of stores at the moment we are refurbishing, getting more attractive, getting more sexy. You have really nice products. They're really, the setup is really like a market setup, I would say. So Lidl could also be interesting depending on your price, depending on your positioning when you want to enter the French market. Now I enter into the, let's say, advice or insight and how to be ready when you want to target the French market. So some of the points may be totally obvious, but they are so important. So first of all, you need to know your market. So I mean, you need to know the French market, how the French market is organized and how the French market is working. Excuse me. It's a big market, it's a mature market, it's a very competitive market. So you really need to see, you really need to know the trends, you really need to understand how the French consumer will buy a food product or a drink product, and you need to go into the stores and look at your competitor. That's very important. The second point, it's cultural differences, and I would insist on French language. We're not really well known to be good with foreign languages. And if you don't speak French, it's going to be a little bit difficult to enter the French market. So French category managers, French buyers do understand English more and more now, but they're not really keen to speak. So either have a French speaker within your team or try to work with a local agency or a local distributor or a local intermediary, but it's definitely very important. Obvious, I know, but please know your product, know how to define your USP, know exactly how your product can bring an added value to the category. That's really important, and that's what the buyer wants, the buyer or the category manager wants to hear. How your product will help him or her to grow the category. Know your strategy. Once again, as I said, the French market is really a mature market. We don't really like the one-off order or the one-off opportunity. You really need to have a plan. Even if it's just a short-term plan, you really need to thought of your strategy. What do you want to achieve with which retailers? You need to really have that really clear before you target France. Know your budget. I think you know all about that, but export can be costly. So really think about your budget, how much you want to spend on prospecting, how much you want to spend on communication, on event, on social media, recruiting maybe an export manager, working with an agency in France. Really have that really clear before you go to France. And to finish, know your people. What I mean, French buyers and French category manager don't like to deal with many people. So if they have to deal with your logistic team and the day after they have to deal with your marketing team, no, it doesn't work like that. They like to have one point of contact, French point of contact or French speaker point of contact. And this person within your team will be your man and woman to talk with the category manager or the buyer in France. And to finish, be present. I'm sure it's the same in the UK, but buyers and category manager receive tons of demands every day. So you need to be really different. You need, it's not because they have said no to a first listing that they will say no maybe 1 year or 2 years later. So send the news, be present, tell about your new product development, tell them about new launching in the UK, in any other export market. So really be present. It's really, really important. And I want to finish maybe to explain how to process when you are going to meet a French buyer or a French category manager. And as I explained before the meeting, you really, really need to know the retail brand you're going to talk with. So if you have a meeting with Carrefour, let's take an example, please go in a Carrefour shop, look at the supermarket, look at the hypermarket, look how the products are presented on the shelf, look at the background history of the retailer. It's extremely important, and I guess it's the same for any meetings. Know who you are going to meet. That's very important. Definitely come prepared, definitely. So have a promotion plan or communication plan in mind. Maybe you won't be talking about that straight from the first meeting, but it's good to have that ready. Obviously, have your tariff ready, know exactly what you want to achieve, because the category manager and the buyer is going to ask you, what are your objectives for the French market? So once again, just totally linked with what I was saying before about your strategy, have a plan. And after the meeting, be patient and persistent. So it's quite long. You may have your first meetings, but you don't know about the final decision if you're going to be listed or not. So don't be too impatient. It won't work in 2 or 3 months. Most of the time, between the first meetings and the time you have your product on your shelf, you need to count between 9 to 12 months. And that's the very good case scenario here. So be patient, send news, pick up the phone, send emails, and really, really be persistent. And once you are listed, it's not the end. Not most, but some of our clients thinks, oh, well, I've got the listing, the work is done, perfect. I am on the French market, I am on the shelf, it's great. No, actually, that's where the work is really, really starting. So you need to create a relationship with the category manager and the buyer. Once again, you need to have weekly conversation with him, sending emails, sending news, working on promotion, working on a new product, being present in stores. So you need to think about all the activity in store you could organize. You need to share these ideas with the category manager and the buyer. So once again, create a relationship and be present. That's very important. Well, I think that's all for me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nathalie. That was really, really good. And hopefully everyone's learned something about the French market today. So we've got a few questions in the chat bar. So the first question is, how has Brexit affected trade between the UK and France?
Thank you for the question.
A nice one to start off with.
I love the Brexit word.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer this way. For the UK company who were already doing business in France and who were already having a presence in France, it was challenging, but it was okay. Some managed to have a representative in France. I mean, all about legal and fiscal representation. And it went quite smoothly, I would say. We didn't see any big issues, any big problem. It was just a question of having some kind of representation on the French market. Where it was a little bit more challenging is with people who were just starting to export to the French market, and where obviously all the paperwork due to the Brexit really slowed down the first orders. So, for example, we had a company, and the retailer has to wait maybe 1 or 2 months before having the first orders. So I would say it would have been challenging that way. Not impossible, we find solution, but the process was obviously a lot longer. That was the main issue, I guess, to find solution and to put solution in place. I hope it answered the question.
Brilliant. And if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat bar now. So the second question is, what businesses have you secured? What business have you secured UK companies in France over the last year?
Sorry, I didn't get the question, Maria. What?
Yeah, Richard, it's from Richard Harper. What business have you secured UK companies in France over the last year?
Yeah, so we have 50% of our portfolio which are from the UK. So obviously we have different products, but maybe let me answer this way. It didn't prevent UK company to look at the French market, even if with the Brexit, even if with the COVID situation. I think the challenge now, it's even more the COVID situation than the Brexit. People are really, really keen to start with France, but because we don't have this visibility just yet, they, as I said, they slow down the decision process of entering the French market. But Richard, half of our portfolio is from the UK, and we carry on to work with UK company, and we want to carry on to work with UK company because two main reasons. First of all, I think you really have an understanding of the way we work, first of all. And second of all, you have in the UK very innovative brands, I think. You have very interesting packaging. You really are quite savvy regarding communication and marketing. And in France, and I can say so because I'm French myself, so we have wonderful product, obviously very premium, very authentic product, but sometimes we may think a little bit of innovation and novelties. And I think product from the UK can really bring that into our country. Oh, Maria, I think you are on mute.
Yes, I am. How many times has everyone done that this year? Sorry, thank you very much for the next question. Do you think it is easier to enter the French market retailers with private label or with a national brand?
Yeah, good question. You have it all depending on your strategy. When you start to see private label more and more, it's because the market is now becoming really mature. So it might be difficult to enter with new brands. I would say that we work a lot with national brands because obviously they want to push their brands, they want to push their products. So it's really depending on your strategy, but maybe for some product where you really have already a good offer and a large offer, it might be more relevant to enter with private label, or depending on the offer already present on the market, I would say.
Lovely. And as I said, if anyone wants to write any more questions, please feel free to do so now. So the next question is, organic has been a big thing in the French market in previous years. How do you see that trend growing?
It will carry on for sure, because as I don't know if everybody was there at the beginning of the presentation, but organic is definitely one of the most dynamic market in France. It's worth 12 billion, so that's absolutely huge, which is really important actually for the French consumer. Organic really tick a lot of boxes. It's good for your health, it's good for the environment, and it's good for the producers. So I guess it will really carry on, still carry on. And as I said before, when we enter into a meeting with a buyer, one of the first questions now is, are you organic and are you present on Instagram? So here we are.
The modern world, the modern world.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions? Just give it 30 more seconds.
Just as a company that's worked, or an individual that's worked with Sutralis, and if you're thinking of entering the French market, I would recommend them highly. They're very professional, very well prepared. They have some good people on the ground, and have good relationships with the French procurement teams. So I think they're a good bet if you're thinking of investigating the French market.
Thank you, Richard. Very nice. Thank you.
That's really great to hear. Thank you very much, Nathalie, for everything today. It's been a great webinar, and thank you everyone who joined as well. Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you.